Well, welcome to the Botanical Medicine Study Course with me, your host and instructor on all things botanical medicine. Now, for the past 2 years, I've been posting content weekly on different plants that are used for healing. I will still be doing this, but on a weekly basis for my Patreon members. So if you want to continue getting fresh content, please sign up for the $5 a month level and you will receive weekly botanical medicine updates along with exclusive content on herbs each week. I will continue to post content on this channel, but will be reducing the herbs to herb of the month and we'll be expanding to other topics. So you'll see herb of the month on YouTube and other content each week. So if you want herb of the week, please go to Patreon for exclusive content and you will be in the know. So I have a confession to make. I was planning to simply ignore the new administration for the United States, as I personally was simply exhausted at giving a certain person any of my time and attention. I must confess I was looking forward to his going away and golfing in some foreign country and enjoying his credit limit out of the limelight. I find him and his followers very tiresome, rude, and ignorant, and wanted to focus more on the amazing, wonderful, and healing worlds of plants. I find when I immerse myself either through study or out in nature, working in the garden or walking through forests, a peace as well as an amazement that is really real. It's apparent we are not living through times where ignoring current events is possible. Obviously, many people do ignore current events, but ignoring them does not make such events go away. Now, one of the reasons I love medicine in general and natural medicine in particular is that the subject is so vast and encompasses every aspect of culture, is consistently evolving, and yet is firmly anchored in the material as well as the non-material world. It is the never-ending story and is a perfect home for my very insatiable curiosity. Now, for those of you who have watched my History of Herbal Medicine session, it's available on Patreon and really worth your time. The session shows how the practice of medicine reflects both culture and the evolution of human consciousness. In the section where we explore the creation of Mrs. Greaves' modern herbal, and that's Maud, there's Maud Grieve, that's her picture. And I talk about her extensively in this session. We recognize how this work of timeless art and science, which is called the modern herbal, was created in response to world wars. Mrs. Grieve was British. And with the wars against Germany, which was the main producer of pharmaceuticals for a lot of places, the supply chain to Britain was cut off for obvious reasons. Grieve attempted to fill in the blanks, so to speak, and she revived ancient and historic tradition of her homeland of how plants could be used to facilitate healing. With that, the British people, how did they deal with these shortages? And she basically invited everybody to go back to where they were getting their healing before all these pharmaceuticals. And obviously, pharmaceuticals have their place. I'm not saying that they're not useful, but plants can deal with quite a lot. Now, this little clump of plant up in your slide, it's called sphagnum moss. And during World War I, the British relied heavily on sphagnum moss for bandages. And that was because the supply chain for bandages was disrupted and the need was so great that the local producers couldn't keep up. And what's interesting is sphagnum moss is a genus of approximately 380 species of mosses. It's also called bog moss or quacker moss. And while cotton and wool were initially used, the moss actually was a superior and more absorbent material for bandages. And the war demand for bandages just outstripped every supply line. So the moss was the best and most available substance during the crisis. Now, sphagnum moss, also known as bog moss, could absorb up to 20 times its own weight in liquids, making it really awesome for wound dressings. And I'm sure a lot of the other stuff in this moss was also very healing. Now, there is a wonderful article in the Smithsonian magazine on this entire process. I have a link in the program notes because it's really worth reading. And I'm sure because it's the Smithsonian magazine and it doesn't involve African Americans, the current administration will not erase it from the archives. Now, as many of you may or may not know, I was in the Peace Corps in Albania. And one of the reasons I chose Albania was because of the rich tradition of botanical medicine and the great diversity of medicinal plants in this Balkan nation. And it's absolutely beautiful. And for those of you who are curious, actually in this area of the world, there's more plant diversity than the rainforests in South America. Now, here's a picture of a wonderful herbalist that I was working with. His name is Dimo Kelly. Just love this gentleman. Now, here he is in the forest where he picks his plants, and he's also selling his wares in the open air market where I was living. Now, what contributed to the development of botanical medicine in Albania, now he's an herbalist, okay? What contributed to the development of botanical medicine in Albania during the last century was the oppressive and isolationist government of the communist dictator. The poverty of the nation, coupled with the isolation, meant that the collapse of the healthcare system was inevitable. And there was little, if any, access to pharmaceuticals. The Albanian government thought the Soviets and the Chinese were too liberal. Okay, such tells you where they're coming from. Now, as humans are apt to be, the people sought healing from the plant world. Okay, so humans figure stuff out. If one door is closed, they open up another one. Now, I worked while I was in Peace Corps with a gentleman. His name is Dimo, and this is his pictures. And he's called a Mieksi Popular. And I worked with him while I was in Albania. Now, during communism, he was an engineer who worked in a textile factory that spewed toxic chemicals into the environment. And of course, his workers got quite ill, specifically with kidney problems. And what Dimo did was he went into the forest to seek healing remedies, and talking with his elders who had quite a practice of botanical medicine. And he was very successful in helping his workers deal with these kidney problems that the toxic waste of the factory was creating. Now, after the fall of communism, he actually pursued full-time his herbal practice. Now, you can read about my interactions with Dimo on my blog in the program notes, but this is a wonderful example of political upheaval, forcing people back to nature with good results. So this brings us to the current man-made catastrophe that is slowly, or rather quickly, unraveling the global economic system. Now, since there have been humans in different modes of transportation, specifically horses, camels, and boats, there have been trade routes bringing different products to different places. Now, trade routes have shaped the world. Spices, for instance. Wonderful books on the history of spice and really how they shaped politics. The interruption of trade routes, the trying to make new trade groups, Trade routes, they've shaped the world, and specifically spices, the Crusades, the age of exploration were all sparked by plants and trade routes and lack of thereof. Now, Spanish and Mexican cuisines would not, the things that we enjoy so much, and let me tell you, as a Southern Californian, that's the thing I miss the most when I travel certain places in the world. You don't get Mexican food, but Mexican cuisines and Spanish, which is a fabulous cuisine, none of these would be possible without trade routes and plants being carried on them. Now, two of the three most lucrative commodities on Earth at present are dependent on trade routes and plants, which is coffee and chocolate. The other one that's the leading commodity is basically dead plants, and that's petroleum. Now, there are very negative outcomes on the planet when the current economic system, heavily dependent on the third most lucrative commodity, which is also dependent on underground dead plants and dinosaurs, which is petroleum. Okay? Now, what I find so interesting is that the current person causing so much disruption in our current economic system, who denies human contributions to climate change, and his corporate sponsors from the petroleum industry, he is actually, by his ill-informed and frankly illegal executive orders, getting at the heart of the climate crisis. By shutting down trade, he is drawing attention to the dependence of our modern economic system has on shipping or flying goods all over the planet. So we're shipping coffee and chocolate in either boats or planes that are fueled by petroleum. Isn't that interesting? So interesting. Now, and that shipping of those substances, which are two of the three most lucrative commodities all over the world, are destroying the world. Okay, it's destroying the world. Now, for decades, people such as myself have been trying through education and public awareness campaigns. And honestly, that's why I practice the medicine I do, because it hasn't been in the past dependent on petroleum. But I have been working to encourage people to buy local, eat seasonally, reduce consumption, recycle, and so on. And it's interesting that the person who sits on a golden toilet in the White House is bringing about, the necessity of these practices by his essential misunderstanding. I guess he was asleep during this lecture when he got his degree in economics. He misunderstands tariffs. So what does all of this have to do with botanical medicine? And quite a lot, actually. You see, when power-hungry, malignant narcissists con large demographics of regular people in a democracy into things like war and voting against their best interest, the fallout does not stop the need for medical attention for the general population. Disease keeps happening regardless of who is in charge and what sorts of supply chains are disrupted in times of war or other human causes that are completely avoidable. In fact, usually such malignant narcissists who con large demographics to do things they normally would not do, the need for medicines and healthcare actually increases. So as the necessity is the mother invention, and as we can see in the cases of both the British herbalist during World War I and the lovely herbalist I worked with while in Albania, nature has quite the plethora of plants to address all sorts of medical needs. At the risk of being redundant in terms of responses to current events orchestrated by a malignant narcissist who never pays his bills and wants to leverage the stock market and global currencies so he can make more millions and pay off loans with inflated money, we are now in a situation where healthcare, particularly the modern approach to natural healthcare, is at a crisis point. I had the amazing pleasure and honor of attending the 5th International Congress on Women, hosted in Beijing, China by the United Nations, and this was in 1995. Now, while the people who paved the way for the current malignant narcissist who sits on the gold-plated toilets to be in power were telling us the Chinese were eating aborted fetuses, which, by the way, the Chinese never have done. What was being debated and voted upon back then for the draft plan for action was the support of indigenous approaches to healthcare, which includes botanical medicine. Every culture on the planet has a tradition of botanical medicine. Now, these United Nations draft plans for action, and they vote on all sorts of ones. Let's say they have one on the environment, one on women, one on children, all sorts of these big conferences. 170 nations, which are all the ones that belong, everybody that the current malignant narcissist is putting a tariff on. Actually, is a couple, he's not doing that too. But the Penguin Island definitely has tariffs. The UN draft plan for action are used as templates for governments to draft policies in their home countries. Now, in case of the Women's Conference, regarding healthcare was the governments were urged to support, research, and create access to natural healthcare because these modalities were much less expensive and more accessible to the majority of the world's people than chemically based pharmaceuticals and technical machines that poorer and developing countries could simply not support. So in this UN Conference on Women, there was no debate on this. Everybody voted in favor, okay? So that's unusual. Everybody voted in favor to allow to say governments should support research and create access to natural medicines. Okay, this is 1995. Now, in the United States, medical schools responded to this with training courses. Insurance companies followed suit, and new research bodies were formed to study natural medicine. What followed was an explosion in the supplement market, with major pharmaceutical companies investing in research and acquisition of supplement companies, along with searching for the most obscure plant substances that could address disease that pharmaceuticals were not as effective at dealing with. And this is something that is very relevant today with all sorts of antibiotic resistance, all sorts of things, okay? So in response to this draft plan for action, the US is a signatory to that. We started doing all these really wonderful things. And with immigrant communities from Asia flocking both to Western Europe and North America, they brought their traditions with them. There was a lot of money to be made. Global supply chains were set up, and here we are. Now, a recent industry update by Supply Side Supplement Journal, the industry and retailers have been warned that, quote, tariff impacts will be big and bad, unquote. It's head of an article in the Supply Side Supplement Journal. Now, broadly speaking, the Trump administration has imposed new tariffs on China, Taiwan, India, South Korea, and the European Union. Okay. And that's where we get most of our supplements in the United States. And we get also the substances like the capsules and the packaging and all of that. Now, other tariff hikes were announced, but in the regions I've mentioned, China, Taiwan, India, South Korea, and the EU, um, these are very critical to the supply of dietary supplement ingredients as well as finished goods. The tariffs are so sweeping that stakeholders within the supplement industry, they can't even give a comprehensive response. They don't even know how to respond, mainly because every other day somebody decides a different thing can be exempt and all sorts of things. Now, most people in the industry have said the impact will be significant, but they have no idea how big it will be and which sectors of the industry will be hit the hardest. It's still happening and it changes hourly. Personally, I'm curious how one focuses during this hourly whiplash, but I'm a bit slow on the uptake. Uh, because the amount of tariffs seems to fluctuate on a daily basis, and shipments to ports in the United States have all basically stopped in recent weeks. And I just went into a wonderful, basically a series of health food stores in California, and I can't find a lot. Let's put it that way. Now, one thing that is certain is that supply chains will be disrupted and prices will increase. This means your amazing herbs and vitamins you're taking for your health as preventative, also to deal with certain health issues you may have, are going to be a lot more expensive if you can get them. So, what's the solution? Take the course. Sign up on Patreon for content for as little as $5 a month for updates on industry healing plants. You can get the local lowdown, and $5 a month is much less than your latte that's going to skyrocket in price because the tariffs will be on tea and matcha and coffee. That's what's going to happen. So less than what you would spend for one latte, an entire month of amazing information that will help keep you healthy in this very interesting time. If you sign up for $20 a month, you'll get weekly lessons on all aspects of botanical medicine. So it's not the end of the world. The other thing you can do is you can grow your own herbs, make your own remedies. If you've got a box and you can put dirt in it, you can grow some herbs. You can collaborate with your friends and neighbors. You can get to know your local herb farmer. You can do all kinds of things. This isn't the end of the world. It's very easy to meet this challenge. Now, the Botanical Medicine Study Course, the full course, is as little as $20 a month. You will get weekly lessons on how to do that. So this is a very challenging time. There are all kinds of reasons why it's happening. And as one of the famous lines in one of the great cable miniseries said, is chaos is a ladder. And I personally hope that this ladder of chaos you climb to reacquaint yourself with the natural world and how you can partner with nature and botanical medicine. Even if you can't get the supplements in the market, you can still create a wonderful partnership. So definitely check out the links in the program notes. Sign up for $5 a month, which will get you a weekly botanical medicine update, along with Herb of the Week, which will no longer be available on this channel. And I think if you do all of that and you go out and be in the garden, you're going to be well. This is Stephanie Georgieff saying thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me. I look forward to this new phase of the Botanical Medicine Study Course on YouTube. And until next time, I hope you can keep calm, carry on, and be well.